My first property was a treehouse in Hawaii. A lot of people in my life were just like, this is weird. Like, just put it on the ground. It'd be so much easier if you put it on the ground. I'm like, I don't want to build a house on the ground. I want to build a treehouse. And then when it was successful, they were like, do 10 of them.
Welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patrick Switek. Patrick is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom. Each week, we sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals in the real estate industry and delve into their personal journeys, lessons learned, and secrets to their success. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Kristie Wolfe, welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show. You are truly an inspiration for a lot of people out there because you have been building tiny homes since 2011. You've built some of the most iconic short-term rentals that people have probably seen all over either Airbnb in the most wishlist saved properties or potentially all over magazines like Dwell and the like. But I'm so excited to welcome you and to just share your story of all the properties you've done, like the Hobbit property, the tree houses, the famous potato property you've done. We're definitely going to dive into some of these, so I don't want to spoil it, but I'm happy you're here and want to just like talk shop.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited too.
Awesome. Yeah. So how did you even get started let's just start there. How did you get into this field? How did you get into tiny homes? What was the whole story there?
I did a lot of factory work before I made short-term rentals my full-time gig, but I had always been remodeling something on the side. Really enjoyed remodeling, but not necessarily in a professional sense in any way. But I built a tiny house, which is not a nice tiny house like what anybody is familiar with now. Nobody knew what a tiny house was back then. I think there was like, I don't know, a handful of us that blogged about it when I built mine. So it was essentially a shed on wheels. It wasn't like a prefab shed, but I had constructed all used stuff. It cost me like $3,000, and basically it was just like this little room. I did it as an experiment in minimalism. I was at that time in my life, I would do like a different year-long experiment, like no meat or no sugar, taken away everything. So I was like, oh, I'll try minimalism. But where those other experiments were really difficult, I found like living minimalistic so freeing that I totally wasn't expecting that. So I was like, oh, I love this. I don't see this changing anytime soon. And so I actually bought land where my foreshadowing potato hotel sits now. And it was 4 tiny lots. They were like $1,000 each. And I moved my house, and then I went through the whole off-grid journey. And that was a whole other bit. And I lived in that for several years. And after I had moved in, I had eliminated all my bills. I used to drive cars that cost no more than $500 and then run them into the ground. And so even though I was only making $12 or $13 at the factory, I didn't really have bills. And that got my wheels turning like, oh, I want to build something else. And I decided I wanted to build a treehouse in a jungle. And that started me on my short-term rental journey.
Wow. And so what do you mean by factory? Were you working in like a manufacturing factory, or you were doing all the little things, or how did that work?
Yes, I worked in a potato factory for a while, and that was really fun. But at that time, I was working at a plastics recycling company. So all that like stuff online that says that your plastic doesn't actually get recycled, I worked at the factory, so it does get recycled, at least in some parts. So we would take all sorts of plastics, shred it into pieces, melt it down, and then you would chip that up, and it would go to different places like city works, like utility boxes, things like that, trucks decking. So that's what I was doing.
That's awesome. So you're living proof that plastic does get recycled, which is
Yes.
super cool. I didn't even know I was going to learn that on this podcast, but here we are. That's awesome. And potato farm. So I'm assuming you're from, I looked it up, but you're from Boise, Idaho.
I actually grew up in Southeast Idaho in Pocatello, and that's where there's more potato farming. But in Blackfoot, Idaho, we were actually let out for 2 weeks during harvest, like in school,
Mhm.
because everybody went and worked at the potato harvest. My dad was a school teacher, so I was never in like the ag part, but I'm a big reader and like 5th generation Idaho. And so I I'm like very into potatoes. And so I had come to this time in my life where I could decide where I wanted to work. And like the number one on my list was a library. And then I went into the library, which I was there all the time. And they said you needed like a library science degree to work there. And I was like, I know where everything is. So then my second on that list was a potato factory, because I had never really got to do that and everybody around me had. And so then that's what I basically had to convince them, beg them for a job, because they didn't think I would do well there, but I crushed it. I loved it.
Yeah. Wait, were you when at this time, did you ever think that your life trajectory would go to where it is today? Or what were you thinking back then? Do you remember what your thought process was? Like, did you have high aspirations or
I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Mm,
I like working with my hands. Right now, I'm taking a break. I'm pouring concrete. So that's why I'm in my car right now. So I love manual labor and creating. And I knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur. So I didn't ever even consider college, because I was like, I'm going to be the boss. But I didn't know which direction
mhm,
that would go. And Airbnb wasn't a thing when I was in school, wasn't even on the trajectory. And I try to tell my nieces and stuff, like, the career that you are going to have probably
mhm.
doesn't even exist yet,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep, who knew that? I mean, you went to the factory to make potatoes, but then you made like literally the world's biggest potato like house, which is kind of funny.
It all built on one another, and I did finally land that. I actually ended up being a spokesperson for 2 years for Idaho potatoes, and I definitely put that in my interview that I
Yeah.
worked at the potato factory. Not only did I work at the potato factory, but in Idaho we have like a not a lot of people like this kind of candy bar. It's called the Idaho Spud Bar. It's like marshmallow with chocolate and coconut on it. Yeah, it's about half the people like it. But I would buy Spud bars, and then I worked outside. I worked in receiving. And it was shift work. So you'd work like 14 hours, 3 days a week. And I just made it known around the factory that I would have a trivia question about potatoes. And when somebody got it right, I would hand out these Spud bars, just because I was so interested. When it came to my interview for the spokesperson, I definitely threw in a lot of that.
That is so funny. And I love your energy, by the way. You guys is great. Are you ADHD by any chance?
Probably undiagnosed, but most likely.
Yeah.
If so, I feel like I'm pretty high functioning, but
Yeah.
I would imagine if I had the focus to go get diagnosed, I probably would have it.
That's the number one problem why it's not diagnosed enough, is because you don't have the focus to get diagnosed. I am not even diagnosed, but I just know I have it. There's
Yeah.
something about it. But I feel like we make really great entrepreneurs. I have a whole
Yes.
podcast episode on ADHD empowerment and how it's
Oh,
incredible.
really?
So,
When
check
I
it out, bro.
hear about like the symptoms and stuff of it, I feel like I relate a lot more to how it shows up in men than women. Like, I don't have a
Mhm,
depressive bone in my body,
mhm.
not like an overwhelmed thing, but that also could just be being raised in a time period where that wasn't recognized, and I had to just make things that worked for me.
Right. But that's cool. I'm a high functioning as well, and I feel there's things I don't like doing, there's things I really like doing. So,
Right.
that's our superpower. We have our own thing, and so that's cool.
One of
Now,
my favorite quotes is by Kevin Kelly, and it's something along the lines of, enthusiasm is worth 20 IQ points. And I
mm,
feel like that is really key, especially with people with ADD, is like being so into what they're doing,
mhm.
and that just being contagious
Oh,
has
absolutely.
definitely served me.
That's absolutely. So let's talk about how your obsessive personality manifested through in 2011 when you built your first house and you bought the piece of land. How did you even get the money to buy these things? Like, how did you even get to that point?
Yeah, I didn't have savings. I don't come from any sort of money. So again, just worked hourly shift work. My original tiny house cost me about $3,000, and I was just buying used stuff. Even at that time, people were like, you can't build a tiny house for 3,000. But I was literally like looking at Facebook ads, and they'd be like, this insulation's free, just take it out, and shaking out rat droppings from
Mm,
it. So you can, it's just maybe not what you want. And so I had built that, moved into it, and then my land, I can't remember if it was $4,000 or $5,000. I think it was 5,000, but it's just
wow.
in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't have $5,000, but I had 1,000, and so I told him, I'll give you 1,000, and then I'll pay monthly payments, and that's what I did. And then
Wow. You did
as
seller
things have.
financing. That's seller financing.
Yes.
Wow.
I've seller financed every single one of my properties now, like unknowingly, and every single one of those properties, it wasn't advertised as that they would do that. I just asked and every single person said okay.
Wow. That is crazy. So you just seller finance, just like you literally just took the owner as a bank and you just paid them over time for that land and you just used
Yes,
it.
and two of them they didn't even charge me interest. And the other ones
Wow.
I paid interest. The more expensive ones I did, but all short contracts, 3 to 5 years. The $5,000 one was a lot shorter than that. It was probably 1 year.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So you bought this pot of land, just finance unknowingly. I already know that. I can just tell by just your personality that you're just like, you just figure it out. And I feel like that's what entrepreneurs do. You just figure it out. You don't really know sometimes where your trajectory is going, but you just go with it. So now you were doing that and you got the potato. So where did well, the first concept was, what was after the first concept? You said the first
So
concept was,
my first property was a treehouse in Hawaii. I just figured that Hawaii was a good place because I hadn't heard anybody complain about it, but I had never been there.
okay.
But going back to the potato factory, which I hadn't worked in for years, but there was a mechanic there who knew a guy that was from Idaho that had spent half the year in Hawaii. And he was like, they have cheap land there. And that was like mind blowing. Hawaii has
Right.
cheap land. And so that kind of stuck with me. So when I started thinking about doing a treehouse and wanting it to be in a jungle, I just went on Craigslist and looked up properties. And so there's only, not everywhere in Hawaii is cheap, but there is a cheap area of Hawaii on the big island. And so I just looked at Craigslist ads and I found a piece of property and it just looked like a jungle, an overgrown jungle.
Mhm.
I called up the guy and he was on his own minimalism path. And him and his wife were selling all of their belongings to retire at 40. And this land was just something that they had never got around to using. And so they sold it to me, owner finance, and it was $8,000. I paid a down payment and then $200 a month for 3 years. And I had gone over there in that first year and built it. And so it was profitable from 100 days in to
Yeah.
the
Let's talk about the
build.
treehouse. How did you build a treehouse? Did you just like put together like don't you have to work with ordinances? Like how did you put together a treehouse?
So this is a non-permitted build. Over there, everything has changed now, I should say.
Mhm.
But over there at that time, there was like lots of shanties. There still is shanties being built and stuff
Mhm.
in the jungle. There's just like people living out there. So that one was a little bit more unregulated than my next builds that I've done. But the process is really similar. So I'll start sketching on napkins while I'm eating. That turns into graph paper. And then I start to think about, okay, what are all the lumber components to this? Then I see how much that's going to cost me. And then it's always too much. And then I figure out a
Yeah.
cheaper way to do it. So that's essentially what happened. Like I had a rough plan of how we were going to build it. And then every day it was just a process. So my mom came over with me for the first month. And once I had a roof, there was no windows or doors, but once there was a roof, she was like, you're on your own, kid. So then I stayed and finished it. It has huge beams that we had to get in the air, and have no upper body strength. And so even that it's just not a pretty process, but we bought a couple $30 winches and we just winched it up 1 inch at a time until it was 15 feet in the air. And then
Wow.
just all my strength lift it into a bracket, that sort of stuff. And that's just how it is every day, every hour of every property that I've
Were
done.
you with somebody else at that point?
No,
You did
just
it
me and my
alone.
mom. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I just stayed out there and worked on it.
So what was the goal of this treehouse? Was it to put on Airbnb?
Yes, that was the idea. Airbnb, even at that time, wasn't like, I think VRBO was probably bigger, but
Got it.
I hadn't ever rented anything. We were still renting vacation homes. Like me and my girlfriends would rent from like the Thrifty Nickel newspaper, and you wouldn't know
Uh-huh.
what you really got until you showed up. And it
Yeah.
was this huge process. So I literally didn't know anybody who had stayed in an Airbnb. And then when I went to register my house on all the different platforms, Airbnb was just far and away better. And so I ended up only sticking with them. That's who I've had forever. I don't have anybody else. But my idea was, okay, if this rents, I had no idea if it would. If it rented 8 days a month, that would replace my factory job income. And if
Mm,
it doesn't rent at all, like I spent my money, but me and my friends have a vacation home in Hawaii. And so I was like, that's not a bad worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Luckily, it just ended up booking out pretty quickly. I think my first month was probably around 65, 70%. And by the second, third month, I was booked solid.
What was going through your head at that time? Were you just, I'm onto something?
Yeah, I was thrilled because a lot of people in my life were just like, this is weird. Like, just put it on the ground. It'd be so much easier if you put it on the ground. I'm like, I don't want to build a house on the ground. I want to build a tree house. And then when it was successful, they were like, do 10 of them, do the whole street in them. And I was like, no, now I want to do something else.
Yeah.
And so I bought land and built a hobbit hole next off of the profits I earned from that one.
Okay, so the next home was a Hobbit home. Where did you get the
Yes.
idea of a Hobbit home? Are you a Lord of the Rings fan? What was the inspiration?
I am not, but there's like a cartoon from the 70s, and I wasn't born until the 80s, but like I knew what a hobbit hole looked like, and I
Mhm.
always was enchanted by that. So cute, round door.
Yeah.
So I was more enthralled with the house. Of course, when I went to go build one, then I did read all the books and everything to make it as authentic as possible. When my mom was up on the ladder, she hated being on a ladder helping me build, and she would say, I just hate this. And I'd be like, it's okay. The next one I'm going to build in the ground. It'll be fine. And so it was no easier, but yeah, I wanted to do something completely different. And my projects have all been very different from one another as I've gone on.
So you just draw inspiration, you always create something different. You don't hone in on one thing. Now,
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you did the Hobbit home. What are the numbers look like for these houses? Are they setting you up for life? Or are they doing okay? What's like the look there?
They do really well. I mean, they're booked and they're booked out. And so financially, it's fantastic. But I would say that's maybe like the fifth reason that I do something. Like I am building something and I'm just hoping that it works out. And
Yeah.
luckily, that's been the case because some of these are really remote, really random. I definitely thought the potato was not going to be as big of a deal, I would have to charge less, it wouldn't rent as much, and then it went like insanely viral. I want to create like an experience, and because I'm so into what I'm doing, I don't really worry about the money or numbers, and I just got really lucky so far. That has always followed and allowed me to keep building. Now, if I would just stop building, then I would be sitting pretty good. But I keep taking my money and buying land and building more and more things.
But you enjoy that. That's what your life is all about. Like you seem like a very hands-on person that enjoys that process. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, as long
You
as
know?
I'm healthy, I feel like I'll
Yeah.
be building. Yeah.
Oh my God. You could be building till you're 80, 90 for all
I
I
don't know about that.
know. But is your back, you're trying to get like back pain? That's cool. So you have this, that's awesome. So you have the Hobbit hole. How many, okay, what's next after the Hobbit hole? What was next in the agenda?
So those two I built from the ground up, but the next one was a fire lookout that was already
Ooh.
built. It just had been abandoned for decades. And it was like a traditional, original fire
How did you
lookout.
find this? How did you even find this fire lookout? And
So I knew that this was on like a short list of builds that I wanted to do, but because they're built on Forest Service land, you typically have to buy them when they're decommissioned. So you would be buying like all the parts and then you'd have to erect it on your own land. So I was like feeling like I was ready for another project. I was looking that up, but then I stumbled upon a blog post where the one that I bought, Crystal Peak, was for sale. However, the blog post was old, and I discovered this like in the middle of the night. And so I was really like just going down a rabbit hole trying to find information on it because it was in Idaho. Idaho is a big state. So where I live in Boise is in the middle, and this is up in the panhandle near Canada. So it's still a 7.5 hour drive. But I couldn't find the listing anywhere, figured it had sold. Finally, in a comment on a Facebook post from a year ago, I found the realtor and I reached out to him, and he's, oh, it's actually still for sale. And I was like, don't sell it. I'll be there in 2 days.
that is hilarious. By the way, I just realized that it's Boise and I mispronounced it earlier. So that's
Boise.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to all the Idaho people that I've offended with that. I will make sure to pronounce it correctly. But so going back to the story, you found this place through like through Facebook or through
It was no, it
Craigslist?
was on a blog post, but then a local radio show had posted it to their Facebook page, and then that had comments that I was able to follow and track down because I didn't know exactly where it was or who it was listed by. And it's on the top of a mountain in the forest, so it took some digging
Kristie,
to find it.
you're wild. You are literally
Well,
you're,
and I bought that owner finance from this older couple. And she still, anytime the lookout is in the newspaper or something like that, she clips it out and sends it to me. It's
aw,
so sweet.
that's cute. That's cute. That's really cute.
Yeah.
And do you have a good relationship with the previous sellers of their land or whatever? Do they kind of
Yeah, I
follow
would say
your
I'm not in
footsteps?
contact with everyone, but I am with some because some of it is just land. And
Yeah.
so there was nothing. This one of my ones that opens next month is this shipwreck house.
Mhm.
And I've been in touch with that family that originally built it in the 60s. And the gentleman is still alive, but I have not met him yet. And I'm
Mhm.
really looking forward to doing that this summer and
Wow.
showing them the whole. He's seen pictures and stuff, but I can't wait to have them down and show. So I like in the couple buildings that I've done that there was a previous owner. I have definitely reached out to them. And with the fire lookout, a guy had moved it and re-erected it. And he was like one of my first guests that ended up
Mhm.
staying. So
Oh wow, that's amazing. And so with that, so you basically are like an FBI agent online. Look like those girls that will find the ex-boyfriend, like new girlfriend situation and stalk them and
yes, I
but you
haven't
do it
gone
for
that hard
property.
for a guy, but for a
For
property, I
property,
will
you will do
find
it though.
out.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll fly out, you'll go crazy. You'll fly out,
Yes.
you'll meet them in person, 2 days, like right now.
Yes.
I love that. I think that's so cool because I think it's a very unique way. It's a unique property. It's hard to find some of these properties. So it's like really interesting how you just went down this rabbit hole to like make sure that you found the realtor and shot your shot. Was there any time that you shot your shot and it didn't work out?
No, I don't think so. With the project that I'm working on this summer is on a lot bigger scale. I raised a bunch of money on Indiegogo. We
Nice.
pre-booked it out 2 years. I'm building 5 fire tower lookouts I've redesigned them. It's going through, I didn't know this was a thing you could do, but you can copyright your architecture plans. So I'm having mine design copyrighted. Anyways, this is a huge property. It's my dream property. It's 55 acres in the Panhandle, and there's like a creek and a pond.
Wow.
And it took me probably close to a year to get that deal done. And the people that owned it was an elderly couple that's from Korea. So there's a little bit of a language barrier. And then I'm going through their realtor as well. And they've been trying to sell it for 6 years, but he was adamant that they wouldn't do seller financing. And I could not afford it if
Mhm.
they didn't. And I was just super persistent. I ended up actually making a snow globe that has a fire tower and a little snow cat in it and writing a letter and sending it to them. I was going so far as like looking up what are traditional Korean gifts that you can give homeowner things. And they do like lots of herbs and spices. I don't know anything about that. And then what I thought was interesting when I looked up that culture is when you buy a home that they come and they help you clean and put your house, which wasn't an option for me either. But I'm like, Americans need to adopt that. That would be
Yeah, that is so
really
cool.
nice. Actually, instead of a candle, you actually have somebody help you clean up and get things
Love
ready.
that.
But yeah, I was just so persistent. When I finally got the realtor to deliver my gift to them, it was done in 20 minutes.
Wow, because you were able to adhere to their culture.
I don't think it was actually their culture because I didn't really have anything culturally. So I just
Mhm.
made my own gift and I
Aw.
painted I gave them my renderings and I said, this is my dream for this property. They had a dream and it didn't work out. They ran into some health issues and stuff. And so I just tried to tell them I am obsessed. I know this is where this needs to be. This is what I plan on doing and just trying to show them I'm a human that really cares and I'm going to do something really special with it. And even if the owners aren't like necessarily into unique and funky things, I think most people can get inspired by somebody who wants to do something cool. And so I think that's what it took.
So, Christy, I love that you just said that. And I feel like you keep saying like same theme about like with previous owners of properties, or like in my case was a property management company. I followed up 7 times to just get in touch with them, to talk to them, just to get lunch with them, not even to buy their company, not even to whatever. Seven follow-ups to talk to the owners of the previous company I just bought, the co-host company. And I remember going, it took a lot of time to really warm them up, but they didn't want to just let go of their management company to anybody. They didn't want to sell to a big corporation. They didn't want to sell to anybody, but they talk to us and they're like, wow, our values are aligned. Like, we really like the vision that you have for this company. We really like what you're bringing to the table. We had a really good rapport and good relationship. And that's what solidified the deal. More than anything, they were in their minds are like, this is divine timing. We want to work with you guys. And that was like really special to us. But that's also because we collaborated and we talked about what that future would be. And so I think a lot of times people just really want somebody to like carry their legacy. And
Definitely.
you did and you're doing exactly that, which I think is so cool. I just wanted to chime in and share. But yeah, I think maybe they saw the vision that you were doing, and maybe it wasn't like 100% what they were gonna do with it, but they just saw that you were creating something, and maybe that's what needed to be done in order to keep
Yeah.
carrying their legacy of what they've built. So that's cool. Anyways, I wanted to ask, okay, so before we get into this big project, which I really want to dive into some of the other stuff, but let's talk about the potato. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the potato kind of puts you on the map more than anything. Or am
I
I
guess
wrong
so.
about that?
It was my fourth Airbnb,
Yeah.
but I will say it's the one, if I call the bank and they have to look at my bank account, they're like, you own the Potato Hotel? Like, almost everybody has heard of it. And
Yeah.
that is the opposite of what I thought I'd been planning. Much like you said, I was scheming for years to
Mhm.
get my hands on that potato.
Yeah. Yeah. There you
um,
go.
and it took a long
Yeah.
time for it to come to fruition. But it was in Idaho, we have a potato commission. So every time you buy a sack of potatoes, 2 cents from every pound goes to this commission. It's the oldest food commission in the country. So now you would have Florida oranges, Georgia peaches, whatever. And that 2 cent, it ends up being millions of dollars. And that goes into the protecting trademarks, advertising, marketing, things like that. So there's an old postcard of a big semi truck with a big potato on it from like the 50s, a black and white postcard.
Wow.
And the marketing agency thought that it'd be fun to recreate this for a year, make a real life version of that postcard. That's my potato. So they put it on the back of a semi truck. They made this big concrete potato, and it was only supposed to go out for the 75th anniversary of the truck. Right now, that the new potato is actually on a barge going to Hawaii because they've never been to Hawaii before. So it's become a whole thing. It went out and it just kept getting requested. So it's still on the road. But the one that they originally built wasn't really roadworthy because it was only supposed to need to last 8 months. So I toured with it year 2 and 3. And I'm like, I know that they're getting rid of this thing at some point. And so I'm like, I'm going to put it on my farm field that I have outside of Boise. I'm going to put that in my backyard and make it into an Airbnb. Through that time, then I had built 3 successful Airbnbs. And I heard that they were retiring the old one. And I reached out to the president, and I still go to the Christmas parties that the Potato Commission holds. They still invite me, which is so nice,
That's so
years
sweet.
after working for them. And so I made a little video. I remember I was headed to one of my properties to go fix a pipe or something, but I just made a quick video and was like, hey, Frank is his name. I was like, what are you guys going to do with that old potato? Get you up to date. I have 3 properties. They've been in magazines and TV shows and they're booked, and I think I could make this into something cool. He happened to go to a dentist appointment or something, and he's flipping through a magazine and he sees my Hobbit hole in Money magazine that same day.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that my place was in that magazine. So he takes it back to the board and he's, I think that this might be a thing. So I had to go and present. It's a bunch of farmers and shippers and tell them my idea. And I got it voted unanimously in my favor that they would give that to me. I thought I would have to pay for it, but they paid for it to be delivered and everything. It still cost me a lot to finish everything out
Oh yeah.
because it wasn't a livable situation. It was just a prop. But,
Yeah.
and then it became a huge success. So in the first week of it launching, their marketing arm figured out just in newspaper and news channels that it had garnered them nearly $2 million in free advertising. And we just did a promotion with Lay's. It just is the gift that keeps on giving. We still have like huge partnerships all the time. Airbnb
Wow.
used it, and it was in like the World Cup commercial and things like that. So it was a very good investment for them.
Yeah. Wow. And you created that. That's so awesome. Congratulations. And the
Thanks.
potato is really cool. I would love to link some of these in the description. But yeah, like I think that's how I knew who you were, to be honest. You're the potato
No,
lady.
it's
Yeah, I don't
so
know
sad.
if you like, I don't know if that's like the good branding, but that's what I knew you as. So the potato house ladies. I'm curious, like right now, do you guys get a lot of, I'm assuming you guys get a lot of brand partnerships and brand deals with with that house?
Yeah, I don't actually make money from it, but we'll do partnerships where the Lay's ones, for instance, they had a big competition and they flew out the winners to come stay and put a bunch of products in there and stuff like that. I will always do a fun promotion, but yeah, it keeps going. My favorite comment from that time of like really going viral, it was just like a whirlwind and I was still finishing things up and getting ready for guests. But my favorite comment was, the moral of this story is you might look like a potato on the outside, but you're beautiful on the inside. So whenever somebody peeks inside, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what it looks like in there.
That's so funny. I love that. I do call my girlfriend a potato sometimes, so that's gonna make her feel a lot
She should
better.
take it as a compliment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's beautiful on the inside. Anyways, so with that potato, is this still, what are the, can we get into some of the numbers? Like, what is the nightly rate on that usually go for?
It's around 200. I think I have the flexible thing, so it probably ranges from about 200 to 300. We might have 4 days a month maybe unbooked due to like cancellations, things like that.
Wow.
But I think on average, all of my properties, we have a 97% occupancy. I
Wow.
know that some people, and maybe if you have a traditional house, this is true, where they say if you're that booked up, then you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
But there is a sweet spot. I feel like if I went too crazy, then like the value would drop in the ratings and things like that. Yeah, they all perform well. They're all very different in different places. It takes different amount of effort to get to them. And I can't give anybody advice, but it's been my experience that if you create something cool enough, people will come.
Yeah.
This one in Boise, people fly in from all over the world to come stay at the Potato.
Wow.
It's not locals that are staying here. They're coming from everywhere.
Wow. And that just goes to show that I think that is, but that's hard for some investors. And I had another friend of mine, Sarah Carwell. She did the same thing where she would buy, not the same thing exactly, but she would buy a property and she'd be like, I could do better than all the comps. And like the numbers don't justify it at all, but she would just put up a property. And I interviewed her for this podcast. She would put up a property and it was supposed to only do 100,000. It would do like 180 because she did way better than everybody else. She did like better design. And investors were like, I'm not investing in that. There's no way that I'm going to get my return. And she's like, just watch me. Like, I'm going to do better than
Yes,
everybody.
I've been like self-funding. I
Hmm.
hopefully will do an investor for the rest of my new project because it's
Yes.
so much bigger. But
Yeah.
yeah, really hard to justify any of these
Mhm.
random ideas.
Yeah.
No, trust me, it'll work. But when Airbnb and these different tools would have that they would offer a price for you to list it at, they would say $40 because I have no amenities. They'd be like, oh, a studio with no amenities, your place should
Hmm.
be $40 instead of
Yeah.
$400. And so I have not been able to use any of those tools or follow those things because I feel like I'm too far ahead of that, or it's too weird to be on it. And even with these properties, I did a couple promotions with Airbnb for when they launched the OMG fund, and
Hmm.
then also with the OMG category. And so I had been talking to them and they had been seeing this, that with these weird, unusual places, instead of you saying, oh, we're going to New Orleans and we're going to find a house, they would say, oh, I want to stay at this treehouse, we're going to Hawaii. So,
Wow.
like, the
Airbnb is the
house
destination.
itself was the destination.
Correct.
Yes. And that's what they found with all these weird ones, that kind of ends up being the case.
Wow. And so that's like your goal. And so let's bring you back to like present time, right? Because you're working on some cool things. What is your goal in life right now? Is it really to try to keep creating these unique experiences? What are you really focused on right now?
Yes, I have a couple builds happening simultaneously. One of them is happening behind me, and it's called the terrarium house. It's a tiny house inside of a greenhouse, and I'm going to have a bath that's like a fountain that you can bathe in. So I'm working on that one, but I don't have like a timeline that I have to be finished. And this one's in my city, so that makes I can work on it here and there. The other project is up north, and I'm waiting for the snow to melt, and that is the Moon Pass Lookouts, where I pre-sold everything. So I'm trying to build all of that so that I can have people staying there in the fall. And so right now I'm like building the walls, and I have a mock cab built, and my brother and I are working on that to try to like figure out all the problems before we get up there. I haven't ever done a project where I'm repeating the design. And we've been able to do like a factory setup of build all the walls, we'll ship it up there. And then once the snow melts enough, I'm just going to move in and go crazy. But that's phase one of that property. So they're fire towers, and they have glass ceilings that are smart glass. So you can block out the sun when you want to and stargaze at night. But then the part two to that is I'm going to build a fire lookout museum there that will be open to the public. And I'm really stoked about that. There's a lot of history in that area for fire lookouts, and so it's going to be multiple years that's going to take.
Wow.
So yeah, goal wise, I feel like almost every day is Christmas, that I get to go like what the thing I'm working on today is. So unless it's like a day of just computer work, which I don't have very many of those, I'm like just so excited. So I'm just going to keep doing it as long as I feel this way. But I have lots of passions, and I think that's why doing Airbnbs has worked so well for me, because I design them and then I'm the one doing the construction. A lot of times that gets lost. I don't have a construction crew. So I will buy property, develop the property, build the place, and then market it and do the hospitality part of it. And I love customer service. So I like that it hits on so many different things. If I was just a designer or just a builder, I can see that not being as fulfilling, but this touches on all sorts of my passions and parts of my brain that I really like.
I think that's variety, right? Every day is so different, and you could do so many different things. It just keeps you occupied, keeps you happy and fulfilled in what you do.
Right.
I feel like, which is really cool. And that's an ADHD thing, but
yeah.
I will digress. But with that like project, so you do all of the hosting yourself. Do you respond to guests? That's it. You don't have.
Yeah, I have guesty, and I've had them since day one. Before I had a guest, I hired guesty, because I knew I didn't want to. If I didn't have them, I'd probably have one or two properties tops. Last year, about a year ago, even the one-off responses that I needed to do that guesty couldn't handle, I felt like that was getting too much for me, having to be like off grid and building. Yeah, so I did finally hire an assistant last year. She was at the conference with me. And so she handles those one-offs, and then she helps a lot with ordering inventory and helping with my like caretakers that I have in each spot. That's like the only real employee I have besides my caretakers. And then I just use a lot of systems.
So let's talk about caretakers. What does that entail? Do you have a caretaker for every property? And if so, is that the housekeeper, or is that like a separate job? Like, how does that work?
They are the housekeeper. I think that caretaker, I call them that because it's more accurate, because we have so many special things. I wouldn't be able to hire somebody from Merry Maids to come in and clean this. They wouldn't know what they're doing. But the potato, we have livestock. So I have to have somebody feeding her every day. So their job is a lot of things. So I call them caretakers, and I do have them in every location. We will go for months. I think last year was our record that we had 60 days of one night stays. Wow. So they had a turnover every single day for 60 days. So I just have the best people. I've had them for years. I know lots of people say this is the hardest part, is hiring and finding people. And a lot of my places are really rural, so it doesn't seem like you'd be able to find amazing people, but I have. And I hire for positivity and then train everything else. And amazing. I feel like the people who do this, like they're truly like part of my family. Like I care for them so much. They care for my places so much. And it's just like this amazing perk to the
Right.
job.
So can I ask, like, how much does a caretaker really charge? Is it per clean? I'm just curious how that
Yeah.
works, like with pricing, because for people that are listening, maybe with unique properties, how that works.
Yeah, I used Turno to pay them. That was huge instead of me having to send a check every week.
Perfect.
So I use Turno and I pay them per turnover. And my places, there's lots of extra things sometimes, and we don't nickel and dime. I don't really pay them for that. If I need to hire, a lot of times I have a couple. That's been what has worked really well. And I have one that's a lady and she has like adult children that help her sometimes. And her dad is our maintenance guy. And I do pay for like the maintenance stuff separately, but if it's a little thing, then the caretaker will just handle it and it's just built in. Typically, they'll be able to clean the place in under an hour. My places are small. If there's something that went wrong or the guest was extra messy, it might take longer. They take the laundry home and they do the laundry at home, but they're probably at the property for less than an hour on any given day. I charge a $75 cleaning fee. I just pay that all to them. I think on average, I have 18 cleans per month. And most of the people I have are like semi retired, I would say. This is like the only thing they do. It's like a fun
Cool.
deal. And because my
Yeah.
places are so well known, there's like a sense of pride of that
Nice.
their community knows that they take care of this place for me. They get to meet people from all over the world. One of the other things is to be a good manager, I guess I would say. I use Marco Polo app to have a face to face.
With
If
Marco
anybody's not
Polo?
familiar with that, it's like how we're talking now, but it's not live. So I would record and then you could watch it whenever you want. But that it's really helpful to one see each other because then it could be a
Mhm.
year and it doesn't feel like it's been a year. It feels like I talked to you yesterday. I saw you
Mhm.
yesterday. But then also if there's something wrong, they can show you instead of a via video versus taking a picture of something and being like, oh, this is leaking and I can't like really see. So it's super helpful in creating that bond and then just nice to be able to see each other. And then, because there are properties that I have not been to in a very long time and they're running smooth. And then I send every review to them. Early on, I was only like letting my caretaker know when I had one property, when something wasn't right, I would let them know. And I'm like, oh, I'm creating like this. I'm only reaching out to them when it's negative, and our
Negative.
guests are so great that
Yeah.
it's not sizing it. So I
Yeah.
send them every review and tell them that they're doing a good job. And then I usually do a Christmas bonus. I also give them a couple, this is what we've been doing for a few years, a few like gift cards that they can give to loved ones or family to stay at our place, and then allowing them to stay at any place they want if they want to go to my other places. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So I love that. I've never heard of the caretaker. Well, I've heard of the caretaker, but I've never seen somebody implement it so well into the Airbnb. But it makes sense, like with what you're doing. And I'm curious, like for your projects, thinking about the projects you're doing right now, you're raising money for these projects?
Yeah, so on the current Moon Pass Lookouts property, I did an Indiegogo campaign. It was very hard. It was a lot harder than I thought, but I raised about 450,000 and that allowed me to make that down payment for the land and then start building. But it doesn't cover the cost of everything to build, not including the museum. So I am going to get a private lender for the rest of the money I need. Well,
Nice.
I'm trying. So
I
hopefully
think
I'll be able to do that.
I think with your presence and what you've accomplished with your portfolio, I believe that you can actually raise a lot more money with higher minimums, only 100,000 minimums or whatever. I think you have such a breadth of an audience of people where you've proven your concept over and over again, where you can probably build some incredible stuff. Because I would love, honestly, I think somebody that's as smart and talented as you are, I would love to see your creative energy in like a boutique hotel, for instance. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but that would be, I think that you would crush it on a boutique hotel, like luxury treehouse boutique hotel, like Onera. I don't know if, but
I have a short list in my head. I just don't have enough time.
there you go. So what does the future hold for you? What are you really going to be working on in the next like couple of years?
I have the Moon Pass Lookouts, which is a big project. So that's going to take up my next couple summers, but I can't really do construction in the wintertime, even though we will host people. Got my terrarium build happening here in Boise. And then I have just a handful of properties that I'd really love the chance to do. I just have to time things right. So it's all up in the air. I think I'm busy for the next at least year and a half, and then we'll go from there.
Have you thought about hiring extra help to get these projects across the board so you can do more, or do you actually just
Yes,
genuinely enjoy it?
I do genuinely enjoy it, but there are some things that, I don't genuinely enjoy putting in a septic tank. I don't genuinely enjoy elect
Yeah.
electricity, but I'm hoping that I can have some people help me with erecting the lookout towers because we're going to be doing so many of them. The hard thing with my properties is they're so small and so remote. So getting a plumber or an electrician or a builder who wants to do a house that is 200 square feet, it doesn't make any sense for them. And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, it's not hard to wire a 200 square foot house. So how much am I willing to pay for that? So a property like Moon Pass, where there's going to be multiple towers and the museum is a much bigger building,
Mhm.
I think I will have extra hands, but scalability isn't a huge priority for me. As long as I'm loving it, then I'm good with it.
That's awesome. So, Kristie, I want to get into last three questions or last couple questions here. Just finished up the podcast. Is there anything that you drew inspiration from in terms of book or movie or anything you've watched that you'd highly recommend other people watch or see?
I'm constantly listening to an audiobook or podcast because I'm like working alone all the time.
Mhm.
So I will always, when I start a project, get book recommendations and listen to books on that topic. So for instance, The Potato, I've already read all those books about our history, but I started listening to even fiction that the characters were farmers, things like that to get you into the mindset. The Shipwreck House, there were so many books about pirates, not my
Mhm.
genre at all, but it was really fun. So I think whatever you're building, if you are that person that's doing it, I think that's like a fun little hack and it spurs all these different ideas. But in terms of just like hospitality, I think Unreasonable Hospitality, that book, I
Yeah.
think The Art of Gathering has a lot of overlap. There's not a lot, I don't feel like, in this like over the top building experience. I don't think that there's a book for Airbnbs that talks about that so much, but that you can find them in restaurants, in throwing parties, things like that. So I think those two books have a lot of inspiration.
Awesome. And for people that want to get in contact with you and learn more about what you do, or like they have questions for you, how can they reach you? Or maybe
Um,
invest with you?
yeah, invest in me. Probably just social media. All my social media is under Kristie May Wolfe. I'm probably the most responsive on Instagram. I spend all my
Love
time on
it.
TikTok, but not really
Yeah.
creating on that.
Love
But yeah, if anybody has like a question about off-grid stuff, like a specific question, I can probably help. If it's just like how to get started, then I probably am not going to respond because that would take too long. I do feel like I get a lot of people that are just like looking for permission to do something
it.
weird. I'm like, you don't need permission. Consider it granted. Everybody can do whatever you want. There
Yeah.
are no rules. If you're having a problem trying to figure out a utility or something like that, or you just want to run an idea, hit me up.
Awesome. And what is that IG? What is it?
Kristie May Wolfe.
Kristie May Wolfe. Awesome. So
Yep.
we'll have that in the description. But
Okay.
Kristie, you are a blessing to talk to. I love your energy. You gave so much content and just blowing my mind. I was going all over the place. So thank you for sharing today and taking a break from your busy day to just show up and just give knowledge. So appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me on, and we'll have to do it again.
Awesome. All right. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Patrick Real Estate Show. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patrick in the show notes below. Until next time.